Hi there, and welcome to the Mindful Messenger Show, brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Media Project. My name is Amanda Johnson, and today we are talking to Deanna Nunez about up-leveling your performance. Most assume Deanna's expertise is putting people to sleep, while she contends it's a tool for awakening. She's a seasoned hypnotist and speaker teaching mindset and how to break through psychological set points. She credits her messy childhood as the mosaic that has created her ambitions. She has always been a working mom and values the entrepreneurial ability to involve her kids in her business for travel and life skills opportunities. Just recently, she completed her 9th successful contract, speaking and edutaining internationally for Norwegian Cruise Lines worldwide, and is the only female hypnotist to contract with the U.S. Marines for 20 years. Deanna is the published author of Burn Your Fat Pants, a book about a group of women who set out to create healthy bodies by loving themselves more. And not surprisingly, her favorite hobby is running marathons, having completed over 25. Remarkable for a girl that flunked PE. Welcome, Deanna.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
I love that. It gives those of us who flunked PE hope that
All right. I was not an athlete in high school whatsoever. It was very disappointing to my coaches.
Oh, I know. I could get by a little bit here and there. Like I was okay at every sport, but
well, I had this amazing sister. Well, she's still amazing, but she back in the day when she's 6.5 years older than me, and she was athlete everything. Like whatever she wanted to do athletic wise, she could accomplish. And so she excelled, on the basketball team and different sports. But when they saw my name come along after hers, the same coaches, they got very excited and then very disappointed quickly that I was not following in her
footsteps. That's funny. Oh yeah, I'm the eldest, so my siblings always say that I set the bar high for them, but it was not in PE, that's for darn sure. So that's a good starting point. Like I actually really want to hear about like what got you started in talking about performance and helping people to lose weight and all this amazing work that you're doing in the world. Where did this journey actually begin for you?
Oh my goodness. I don't think I ever called it performance until that word became more popularized, I would say. For me, I probably just started calling it that in the last maybe 10 years. But prior to that, I mean, I can look back at my earliest ambitions, and I always, I really always had that ambitious spirit, but it was often misdirected. And so once I figured out how to get my flow and my energy and my excitement and passion towards a thing that was beneficial, then I felt like I got on the right track. But prior to that, I felt like a hot mess kind of all over the place. So I would say that I have that type of personality of just like, yeah, let's go do that. But at the same time, I'm not necessarily fearless. I just really want to go experience things. So when I think about my writing ambitions, I was thinking about this in some of the questions that you had asked and I read over prior, that I hadn't thought about this teacher in so long. She was my 6th grade teacher, and I went to a private school, and so one teacher kind of teaches everything when you're in private school. At least it was in my school because it's smaller. And her name was Mrs. Lee, and one of our assignments was to write our autobiography. And this couldn't just be some 2-page autobiography. She wanted us to really go in depth in our story and who we believe we are and some of the experiences that impacted us. And this was in the 6th grade, mind you. So I remember writing, I want to guess that it was somewhere like 10 or 12 pages, which felt like an entire book when I was a kid. And I put it in a photo album. This is so funny. I took a photo, and I'm 49, so I'm kind of dating myself, but take the journey back with me. The old school photo albums that had the clear sheets, that you pull off and it's sticky. So I wrote it all out, perfect handwriting, and then I put them inside those clear sheets. And I basically made my own book because I wanted it to be pristine, and I turned it in that way. And I remember getting an A. And I grew up with a very critical mother. And so no matter what compliment she gave me, it was always some weird delivery. It was always disguised as like almost like an insult, but it was supposed to be a compliment. But I remember feeling that excitement of being valued for my work, and that was Mrs. Lee. And so I think that when we talk about performance, I wasn't necessarily driven to get good grades, but I was driven when somebody pointed out something that I did well. And my mom really didn't point out that many things that I did well, honestly. And so having that outside influence, I think made a big difference. And that's the kind of the first thing that I remember being that internal driver to want to experience different parts of my own expression.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing how those teachers can kind of change your trajectory and be like little angels along the way. I was telling someone last week about all of these people, when I look back at my story, and we tend to look at all the hard stuff and all the negative people, but then when we start to have to weave the whole story together, we can see those little people that were like these little glimmers of hope and shouts from the sky that were like, don't believe it.
They really are. They're our team, right? We need to think of that, our team. And that's one of the things that I have been really turned on by, the idea of subconscious assets versus liabilities. Because I think we tend to bring up the visions of our liabilities, like those things that were our big obstacles, or the people that told us that we couldn't do something, or the experience where we tried hard, but then we didn't make it. I mean, those tend to be what we think about a lot. And when you focus on the assets versus the liabilities, that's to me what that process is. And it was funny, I just recently also was, and it's because of you, I was writing on the ship one day, and I had a lot of trouble with both, like just growing up in a household that was loving, but in weird ways. So, and I think we all experience this on some level. Everybody's story is so different. My parents got divorced when I was 3, is when my dad left, but it took them 7 years to get divorced. There was a lot of weird turmoil in my family, and my dad and my stepmom tried to keep it kind of normal, but my mom wouldn't have it. She was not going for that. She wanted it to be messy because she was so angry, and so navigating my way through those experiences was quite difficult. So I was writing about it one day on the ship, and I had this memory of my father, where he took us all out hiking one summer. We hiked Mount Whitney, and I was 11 years old, and hiked the tallest mountain in the lower United States, or it's the lower part of North America, because Alaska, I think, has a higher peak, but Mount Whitney is the highest peak. And at the time, I thought it was really amazing, but I got sick along the way. I got altitude sickness, and my stomach hurt, and I didn't want to keep walking. And my dad kept encouraging. My dad's a very gentle man, and so he had this gentle nature to push. He wasn't the type that he's gonna, or yell at us or whatever. But he said, "I'll get you whatever I want, whatever you want." And I said, "I just want a bean burrito." I'll hike for a bean burrito. And so at 11 years old, I hiked the tallest peak in the United States for a bean burrito. And that's performance, right? Like, that's performance. And I've had so many struggles with my father that I want to remember those things, those things, and that those need to overtake us, those moments, rather than the opposite.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a huge part of what I help other people do as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many strings of conversation there. So you wrote your first autobiography. It's so funny too, because we talked about you telling your story, and it's awesome that you had a teacher who was like in 6th grade, "Hey, write your whole story."
Up to that part, right? At that point.
Yeah.
I wish I could find it. I don't have it anymore. My mom never saved anything, so it's gone. But I would love to have, reread what my thoughts were at that time.
Different perspectives. When my dad passed last year, we were going through the Hope Chest looking for some of his paperwork, and my mom handed us our folders with all of our stuff in it. Wow, that was enlightening. I was like, where did that sassy little kid go? Like, where did
Right.
she go? I was good. I was glad to see her and be like, okay, well, I know she's in there, so
She is. She needs to come out and play.
we're gonna bring her sass back out. So.
Yeah, she needs to come out and play.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So you had your first go at telling your story when you were at 12, I guess. And so then when did you think about writing again or sharing a message? What had happened in your life that you felt like you had something of value to put on paper?
Oh my gosh. Well, as far as the writing part, it all went to total shit after that. Let's see. So I ended up becoming, after that, I really ended up becoming a very dysfunctional teenager. And I'm using polite words. But that childhood experience, it rocked me to the core. Just all of that was going on in my household. And I became very magnetized towards those kids that didn't give a shit. And you know, this is why we say hang out with the people that you want to be like, because I was just super angry and had a lot on my mind and didn't really know how to express that except for hanging out with the kids that were being rebellious. And so I think I was actually the leader of those rebellious kids. Like, you know, I learned to drive by stealing my mom's car. Those kind of things. I would ditch school and, you know, just get drunk at lunch and then not make it back to sixth and seventh period. And I would, you know, just do all kinds of things. And so I really lost my love for learning and expressing myself through that for a good period of time. It wasn't until I was in my young 20s, I ended up dropping out of school, taking the GED, enrolling myself in cosmetology school because I just felt like that was something that I could do really well. And it was what my grandmother did her entire life. She was a cosmetologist, and I always wanted to make my grandmother proud. And so I felt like that would make her proud. And plus I was really good at it. That was something that came naturally to me. And so I did get licensed at 17 years old as a cosmetologist. But then really my learning and my light bulb went off, not until I was about, I would say 28 years old, when I really started wanting to just figure myself out. And I think that is the thing for all of us, that when we start, it's that ambition. And that's why I love to talk about performance. It's like that ambition that's in you, it will find a way out. Sometimes it might take longer, you know, to get down the road, but it's okay, because it does live inside you and it needs to breathe. It needs to come out. It will find a way. Just like, you know, weeds find a way through cracks in the sidewalk. Like it will come out. So when all of that for me, just, I wanted to change myself. That was the number one thing. And I had already been married at 19 and divorced at 22. And life just like was not going the way that I wanted it to go. And I knew that the only way to change that was to change me. For whatever reason, I did have the insight of understanding that, okay, maybe it's not everything else's fault. It's maybe how I'm responding to it. And you know, when you're raised, for anybody that's raised in chaos or dysfunction or criticism, it really does a number on your mindset. And that's another reason why I'm just so drawn to helping people figure that piece out. So, you know, by the time my light bulb went on, that's when I just went on a absolute mission to seek information and to become a lifelong learner that I am today. So I'd say for the solid, you know, last 20 years, I've been earning my PhD in personal development, and I learn everything that I can about the subconscious mind and discipline, habits, responsibility, I would say also attitude. I mean, just all the components that are sort of the behind the scenes magic that help you thrive, no matter what your career is. Those are the fundamental things that you just got to have in your toolbox. So you've got to master those things. And so that's when I just became so turned on by studying all that I can. And I think it's because it's the contrast, right? Like I was so the other way that then I had this great yearning to change myself. And I could, once you get the change going, then it excites you, right? Then you're like, oh my gosh, mind blown. What can I do with this? And it sends you on a pathway to do things that you never thought you could do. And that's it. Like that's the legacy, right?
Yeah.
I love, like, just do the things that think you're scared to do them anyways. Do them scared. Who cares? Just do them anyways.
Yeah. So contracting with the military, like there's a big scary thing. Like how did that unfold for you? You'd become a hypnotist, obviously, right? In your 20s. So how did that all pan out? I mean, most people aren't aiming at military at first when they first figure this stuff out.
I know. Gosh, okay, so it's gonna sound so crazy, but this is the thing. I had been a stage assistant for another hypnotist, which is what brought me to the whole learnings of that hypnotism even existed. I didn't know anything about it prior to this particular relationship, and I worked for this guy for about 2 years, and I started by dating him and then worked for him, and we didn't work out as a couple, but it was the door that I was supposed to walk through. And I think that was the whole purpose of that particular relationship. And then I got enrolled in hypnotherapy school. So what happened was that with the Marines is I had in my mind that I was going to go perform. I was going to go speak to groups of audiences, and it was going to be funny. And I was going to use hypnosis as the demonstrational tool to show you what your mind can do. And I had known firsthand that I had been stuck in mindsets before, stuck in thinking I was a certain way when I really had so much more to offer. But I was told that, so I had to unlearn that. And hypnosis was the tool that I used to unlearn it. And so I just thought, well, I've got to go do this thing. And I had been exposed to these comedy hypnosis shows. And so I thought from the very beginning, I'm going to do them myself. I'm going to be the one up front. And I was scared to death of a microphone. So don't think that any of these, like, nothing was set up for me. I had to like bust through every wall. And I didn't have to, I chose to. So let's be clear about the words, right? I was just so focused. It's really kind of like a naive confidence. I was just like, I can do this. And it's because I had this vision of me doing it. I didn't know the how, but I had the vision. And so I felt like the Marines would be an audience that would be open to me. And the reason that I thought that is this is so silly, I always totally loved Marilyn Monroe. And when I was a teenager, I had Marilyn Monroe all over my ceiling, all over my walls. She was plastered. And my mom hated that, because my mom was a devout Christian, and she felt that everything that Marilyn Monroe represented was definitely the wrong direction for me. And so that was like her worst nightmare, that I would grow up to be like Marilyn Monroe. For me, it would have been the dream. And so when I was deciding on who this audience could be, where could I go and perform, the Marines just popped into my mind because of those visions of Marilyn Monroe in front of on those stages, and she'd be doing those USO tours, and there was just all these Marines, and I mean all different soldiers, and they were so happy to have her there, right? And so I thought, maybe the Marines could be a good place for me to have that audience. And so I live in San Diego, and Camp Pendleton is right down the way, and I started just doing what you do when you start a business. You start calling up people. Right? You start just like writing it out. Okay, what's my marketing? Where am I going to do this show? Everyone that I did know in that industry told me that I needed to go to comedy clubs and bars, and they also suggested that I didn't get paid, that I would just go and get my feet wet, get some experience. And I thought, well, what if I could get paid and get experience at the same time? And so I called up the Marines and talked to a couple of different club managers. I got the appointment, and so was able to go and sit down in front of them. And I brought promotional pictures. And mind you, I wasn't being very, I really wasn't trying to be like Marilyn Monroe-esque. That was just the vision of my mind that got me there. What I was trying to be is taken seriously. And so I brought these pictures of me like in a suit, in a nice, you know, very professional look. And I brought her the pictures and sat down with her, and she listened to my whole spiel about what I was going to come in and do and entertain the troops and all these things. And this lovely lady she was maybe 5 foot, and you got to figure she had some serious guts if she's the manager of a Marine Corps club, where she's like, she tells these men what they're going to do, and they listen to her. She said, all right, I will hire you, but these pictures are not going to work. And I was like, well, what do you mean? What, like, they're lovely pictures. And she goes, no. And she said, I have mixed reviews on what I'm about to say. She goes, we need tits and ass to get my men in here. And I was, okay. Here I was, now the person up front, I'm trying to overcome my stage fright, and now I've got to be tits and ass. And I was like, no, I want people to take me seriously. I wanted to be smart as well as maybe sexy, but like I had to really find a way to navigate through what that looks like. And I decided, okay, I have two choices. I could either go be offended, right? And go, well, this is obviously not the place for me. They don't take me seriously, and be offended. But I decided I didn't want that because I wanted the opportunity. I thought, well, or I'll go and I'll figure out for me what I'm comfortable with as far as tits and ass. So, so I went back, took some new photos. I took some pictures on a Harley with some high knee-high boots and a short skirt, a little bit of cleavage. I brought the picture back, and she goes, okay, that'll work. So from that point on, she put it on a poster, and she put that poster all over Camp Pendleton, which is a gigantic, huge base. And it worked. All the men came in to the local bar on a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, packed the place, did my very first hypnosis entertainment show. And from that point on, my career just started. It just took off because the Marines loved it. And the manager loved it because everybody was in her bar spending money. And, you know, they still are for profit, even though it's the Marine Corps. And Marines, they move around. They move from base to base, and they started telling people, and they're like, you got to get this lady on our base. She was amazing. And this is the kind of stuff that the feedback I would hear. And so it was just very welcomed. And I learned how to go on stage, be sexy, but also have an important message. I really wanted people to have the takeaway of feeling empowered, feeling like their mind is so much more capable and amazing than they had once realized. And so we always, even though it was crazy stuff that we would do in the show, I always wanted it to be portrayed as that idea that makes the seeds in your mind like, whoa, what did she just do? What else could I do with that? That's how I wanted them to walk away feeling. So from that point on, the Marines sent me to every base throughout North America. And then they started sending me to Asia. And I performed in Mount Fuji, Okinawa. There's a half dozen bases just on Okinawa Island alone, and then also in Korea. And we've gone back there tour after tour after tour. So from that point on, it just took off.
Wow. That's amazing. So then what happened with the burn your fat pants? Because that feels like a little shift that happened there.
Isn't that such the way?
It is the way. And I for me, it's like a really important message to get across to this audience is like we were talking about before we hit record, you know, this whole thing is about the next level of expansion and what does it mean and new opportunities, which means letting things go and being willing to shift and pivot. And so what happened for you?
That's such a good question. I hadn't thought about it. And it's funny because the questions that you asked me, now my dialogue and answers are way different than what I had talked with, what I thought we'd talk about. So I think that with every book, there's probably a piece of you behind it, right? That then you feel compelled to tell that next part of the story. And Burn Your Fat Pants really came from my own issues and insecurities with my body. I started dieting in probably the 5th grade. And when we talk about those stage experiences, getting up there in a body that I felt was acceptable was a huge part of the overcoming of insecurities. And I had the vision in my mind of myself up there, but I would put myself through so much pain and suffering through dieting to, be that perfect. You got to look perfect on stage. And then at one point I just had to get over it. It's like, what is perfect? I mean, that is to the eye of the beholder. And I needed to just accept myself. And so I was someone that had food issues. I mean, I had definitely had, it wasn't to the extreme of disorders, I would say, although I've lived with it for many, many years and now it's shifted. But I definitely, I used food in ways to soothe myself. I watched my mom do it. My mom died of obesity and depression, and she never stopped eating her cinnamon rolls, so like she used it as the thing that made her happy. And, and as a side note, when I was in the hospital with my mom when she was dying, and I was in denial that she was actually going to die, she was eating the crappiest food in the hospital. And I'm like, Mom, this is why you're here, and can we clean it up maybe? And she goes, Deanna, when you haven't had sex in 27 years, a cinnamon roll tastes really good. And it was my first, time that she actually said it out loud. I was like, oh my gosh, there it is. And that's what my entire book is about, Burn Your Fat Pants. It's about like that need within you that needs to be fulfilled. And perhaps that's why you're eating too much. This is the thing that I learned from her. And then I started doing it. And for me, the way that I was able to finally balance out my weight and just find that healthy subconscious weight, I think all of us have a subconscious weight where you can just maintain when you don't have some kind of habit that's getting in the way. And that was the teachings that are in that book, Burn Your Fat Pants. And that getting that straight in my head was such an important kind of backstory that was happening to get me on stage. So, the two kind of stories actually run together, but that was what's happening in my subconscious mind while you see, the woman up there on the stage. I think it's for all of us. We should never judge what somebody else might be going through because we don't know. We have no idea. And that was the kind of stuff that was going on in me, while I was trying to be this, what I thought I needed to be this amazing person on stage, but really just needed to be me. And as I learned to be me is when it all started to just settle down. And that's when I decided to write the book and to share those learnings with all the women that struggle with their body, with food, eating for the wrong reasons. I now do wish I would have named the book something else. And that may still be revised because I'm not in love with that title anymore. It was supposed to be cheeky. And the idea that, we wear those fat pants that are typically our yoga pants that will stretch to whatever size we happen to be in. and truly the commitment is by just getting rid of those and going, no, I'm going to commit to this lifestyle. That's really what the book is meant to be about, but it's a deep dive, So that was what Burn Your Fat Pants was about.
So what happened for you as you were writing through that book? Like, was it an easy thing to write? Were there any plot twists or trapdoors that you found yourself falling through?
I think that it wasn't easy to write because I hadn't really been honing my skills as a writer. I would say first and foremost, just the technicals of actually writing. So I think that was a process. I hadn't brought back that Mrs. Lee confidence. So that was kind of my first, experience jumping back into writing. But the second thing is, I do think the book wrote itself in ways because it had been my life experience. And at that point, I was already leading a group of women across the nation through weight loss. And it's really not about weight loss. Weight loss is a symptom of just healing yourself, healing what's going on inside of you, and learning to accept and be okay with yourself. That's truly what it's about. And I was leading this group of nationwide women to do this process, and I learned so much from them. Oh my gosh, like just, you know, I came with all these tools and content, but then watching them put that to work completely blew my mind. It changed everything. And that's how the book was written, was through their experience, through my experience. I also noticed that as a leader, it was so important to exemplify what I was teaching. And I got them to do all these crazy things that they never thought they could do by, you know, me just doing it scared. And I'll give you an example. One of the things in our group was, we had a lady in Wisconsin who said, because we used to do these weekly coaching calls, and it was women all across the nation that would get on the conference line on a Wednesday night. And she said, how about we run a half marathon together in New York? And it was the More Marathon, which More magazine is for women 40 and older. And she suggested that we do this. And at the time I wasn't a runner, but I'm the leader of the group. And so I thought, well, and I was looking for opportunities for women to come in and lead as well. And to, you know, we're all trying to be inspired to take care of our bodies, to be healthy, to enjoy exercise, to learn how to adopt and identify with being a person that exercises. And so when she mentioned that, I just thought, well, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, there's no way. I don't know how to run a marathon. But at the same time, I had to step up. Like, how many times do we have to just step up? And so I said, okay, yeah, let's figure that one out. Let's do that. And so it was months away. It was, I want to say it was maybe 8 months out, the particular event that she suggested. And so I jumped in and started doing all kinds of research for my ladies, for my group, and figured out how to run. You know, like, how do you run? You start with one step. That's how you run. And then we would go further and further. And so next thing you know, I was leading everybody through training plans, and women were doing all these things they didn't think they could do with 100 pounds on their bodies, the extra, right? So it was so transformational for these women. And that's really why I wanted to write the book, because I just felt like the story needed to be told. And, you know, at the time, there was more, I think, it was a difficult experience to be that vulnerable. And I remember actually the day that I got the copy of the book, and you edited it for me, and you helped me totally create the right flow for my words and my content. Thank you. Thank you. But I remember when I got the first copy, and I thought, oh my gosh, I felt all of a sudden I had that fishbowl experience, you know, where I felt like everybody's now just looking in, and yikes. But now I've become really much more comfortable with vulnerability ever since I wrote that book, and it's been years. So I think that just has opened me up more and more and more. So it's good. It's good. Even though I have moved forward, I do think that book was a very important part of the overall experience of performance, because it taught me a lot of things about performance. It's not just about winning. I think people think of that, right? When you think of the word performance, it's like this very sort of male energy thing, like conquer, win. And I think that it has as much to do it's as deep as it is wide as it is high, right? It's like performance is pulling out the best of you, and sometimes the best of you has everything to do with your vulnerability, how willing you are to share, how willing you are to do it scared, how willing you are to lead. You know, there's a lot of stuff you've got to work through in order to perform your best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've discovered that something that's very consistent with all of my clients is that as we get into the process of like really identifying what their superpower is, because it's not always what they think it is, but it's that sweet spot thing that when they get into it because of whatever happened to them when they were little, it was like something blew open and they were able to do something usually in order to keep themselves safe, right? They're able to like get insights or feel their environment or know how what this person was thinking so they could adjust in time or whatever the case may be. But that superpower is like forever tied to the wound that created it. So,
for sure.
Right? So in the subconscious, like every time you start to get into that place, all of those limiting beliefs come up about why you can't do that. And it's usually tied to that stupid little voice that told you when you were little, you know, all those underhanded compliments.
Yes, I think when for any of your viewers that are wanting to delve into their subconscious, first of all, you're just really freaking brave for doing it. I think many people, when they first think of the idea of delving into their subconscious, they're like, "Oh, it's a can of worms. I don't want to open that can of worms." But it's so different than that experience and so amazingly fruitful because it is tied, just exactly what you said. You will find your superpower in there. So that is every reason why you'd want to explore that. And I one of my mantras is that I'm an explorer of my truth. Because I want to think of myself as an adventurer, as an explorer, like I picture myself, back in the warrior days, but I also, I believe in looking through the eyes of the child. And so when people say, "Oh, it's water under the bridge. Oh, it happened a long time ago. No reason to dig that stuff up." I absolutely think the opposite. I think that it is everything. It is the soil to which all of your flowers are going to grow. And it is your, duty to yourself, to your best self, to go in there and explore, thread through the strengths, the struggles, because there is such a theme there. And basically just don't want to get stuck on one particular vision, right? I have a vision that I was stuck on for so many years, and I actually used hypnosis and imagery to shift it in my mind. And then I also started coming up with other visions that would sort of filter that one out. But it was of my mother, and I tend to talk about it a lot in my keynotes when we talk about vision, because we all have these things that pop up in our head, and they come up typically through images. And you want to always value the eyes of the child. It's not, if you look at it from the perspective that you have now, looking back, you're not going to see or feel, which is what's most important, feel the really hidden gems. You want to go back and look through the eyes of the age you were when you experienced it, because that's when it got encapsulated, right? And this vision for me was when I was screwing off and doing all these crazy things as a teenager. What was really happening in my household was it scared the crud out of my mom, because again, my mom was this very Christian woman that really walked the straight road, and I was so off the other side that really scared her. It caused a lot of fear. And we had this really terrible fight one day, and she was yelling at me, and her spitting as she was yelling, and her finger was right in my face, and she said, "You will never amount to anything." And there was more words in there, but that was the only part I heard. And everything else was like Snoopy, like blah, 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 right? And those words got so stuck in my mind that it took me years to overcome them. And it was so unnecessary to suffer from that for that long. And I do hope that your viewers take that, if they don't take away anything, that they do take that away. Like, you are in control of your suffering. And if you can just see how unnecessary it is. I call them the uns, unnecessary suffering and unnecessary truths, or untruths, excuse me, unnecessary suffering and untruths, because we tend to put truths on things that aren't real, and we suffer unnecessarily. So when we talk about vision, pick and choose the visions that benefit you. Like, those are the ones you want to keep around. And the ones that don't benefit you, they do somehow, right? So to me, what I see through that now is the pain of my mother and her living a very sheltered life. Like, she probably didn't let herself experience a whole lot, so she had a lot of fear over what I was going out and doing and spreading my wings. So if you just shift the perspective, every single one of those things that have held you back can give you some kind of learning that will propel you forward. And that's what we need to do for ourselves, right? is to keep feeling our full expression and just like go adventure on what that is, you know, whether it's writing a book or finding your tribe, leading your tribe. I mean, it can be all kinds of things that other people are into just like you know?
Yeah. So let's dig in a little bit more with that. We have a little bit of time left, and I'd love for you to share a little bit of this process that you take people through as far as like understanding what's going on behind the thoughts that we think we have.
That we have, I know.
Right. How do we, like, where do we find the ones that are really there? And then what do we do? Like, what are some core things that you kind of at a high level work people through in order for them to really optimize, not just optimize their performance, but their entire lives, right? Like their thinking and their behaving. And
Yes, because it is both, right? It's both the visionary's mind as well as your behavior, your habits, that you have to attach the two. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. And I've been a dreamer most of my life, and it wasn't until I started realizing that I needed the right habits to go with the dream that I actually started getting further down the road. And I still stumble with that. Just because I have like so many things that I want to accomplish. But you know, it's like constantly refocusing my mind. So what I would say is like a client that comes to me to do this, what I call elite coaching, is this high-end experience. And because it's such a deep dive, I feel like it's really important for them to be ready. And when you're ready is when you have a specific place you want to go, but you've got stuff in the back of your head that's preventing that progression. That's how I would qualify that particular person. This is not it's not a program. It's not you're not ready if you're sitting on the couch being a dreamer. You've got to have somewhat of that achiever mindset that is in motion to be able to use the tools that I give you to really break through the whole thing. And those have been like my best clients. When I think of my clients that have had so much amazing success, they blow my mind. It's because they were ready. And so to be ready doesn't mean you have it figured out, right? Not at all. But what we do is you typically have something, you're like, this is what I want to accomplish, but I got this shit going on in the back of my head. It's like, rah, rah, rah. And so what we do in a hypnotherapy session is I do two things. First, we map it all out. I do what's called a launch session, and I sit down with people, and I work with a ton of people over the phone because I'm traveling doing speaking opportunities, and so I tend to meet people, and my audience is all over. So I do a lot of sessions over the phone. We map it out. I have you go through an assessment that helps you get clear on what your specific goals are, but most importantly, what the obstacles are. Because I don't want to know the obstacles as the way you have written them in the past. Blah, 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 like bullet points. Well, this keeps happening, this kind of. No, I don't want to know it like that. I want to know what your feeling mind has to say. Because that's where we're going to get somewhere fast. So I have you tap into your emotional mind. And I'm always like telling my guys, okay, look through the eyes of the child, because we will put so much judgment and criticism on where we think we should be now. It's not about that, right? We want to get that stuff that's in the canyon below, like you're here and you want to go over there and there's this big gap in between. We're going to build a bridge. We're going to build a bridge with each session. And so that first launch session, we focus on what's all the stuff. I want to know, what are the things in your head that keep popping up? What do they keep saying to you? And then we're going to follow that storyline back and through using hypnosis as the tool. We can do age regression. We can use timeline therapy. There's different techniques that are very simple and hugely powerful to cut through all of the mess super fast. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, we tend to get people to that next step really, really fast. I say we, because I feel like it's such a team effort. It is that I like the sessions to be one after the next because we get such a momentum going. But I would say also what you do helps people dig through their subconscious mind as well. Anything that you do that is involving your emotions and your creativity is going to be the pathway to your subconscious. So remember that. Like anything that you do that involves the subconscious assets of how your subconscious behaves, you're going to be affecting and influencing your subconscious mind. So for instance, If you're someone that's you want to start exercising more, walking and running, it is a very subconscious thing to do. You learned how to do it years ago, and now you don't have to tell yourself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So it's very different from other forms of exercise. When you're in that space, you're in your free space. It is a great time to problem solve, to put legs to your dreams, to put actionability to your dreams, to work through an issue that you've got going on. I can't tell you how many times I've run crying. So it is a time when you are really tapped in, is what I would call it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that would be is writing. It's a very creative experience. And when you're writing from not your cognitive mind, but from your emotional mind, telling that story really, and if it's not your own story, then you're really into your character. And you're in them so emotionally that you're able to share from a different part of you. That is a very subconscious experience. So there are many ways to tap into it, but I would say do one.
Yeah.
It's such an important, valuable process for your, evolution of while you're here in this body, in this life, to do that.
Yeah. I love it. I just got back from a retreat, and we had there's this exercise that I have people do with art when they get there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of it is to like excavate the stuff that is underneath the surface, right? Because they're not using their normal modality. And so I love this idea that you can kind of play both sides, like go with something like walking or running where you are, you have your body mind distracted and you're kind of free up here to do that. But then also the value of doing something that you feel like completely incapable of doing. Like I got stick figures. That's all I've got when it comes to art. And somehow, for some people that's like, time out, they can't do it. We have to figure out other ways. But for a lot of people, there's a lot of freedom in being able to do something very poorly and just kind of see where it goes. It's like writing that first shitty rough draft, like just write it and get it to me so that I can show you what we can do with it, right? It's like just map it and share it so that we can all tell you what we're seeing in there as well, and help you to see more that's behind there. So I love that. The balance. That's so
one of the things that I came up with for Mind Body Fit Club in this program, helping women to just accept their bodies and be healthy, I had them, instead of how we typically write down all of our foods, when we start to want to be accountable for what we eat, we are taught, write everything down. And I think that is really important because it does make you accountable to how many calories you're actually consuming. But I was looking beyond that. I'm not just looking at the stupid calories you're consuming. I want to know the behaviors underneath. What is your need to overeat? Why? Why does it matter? And so what I have people do, have my ladies do, is write out their food consumption in flowers and weeds. So I would have them draw out like all of the things that they ate healthy that day, draw them out. So breakfast, flowers, like you had an omelet that, had all these healthy vegetables in it. And then you had an apple with some peanut butter. Like those are all flower foods. Those are all healthy foods. And my intent was for them to start to subconsciously associate with healthy foods as being beneficial. And then when they were eating some of the other things, it would be weeds, I had a bunch of chips. Women tend to go, well, I was good or I was bad. We don't want those kind of associations when we think about our food or our body, good or bad, really? So to me, it was like, how can I get them to creatively tell their subconscious mind that this is something I want to do. I want to grow more flowers in my garden, and sometimes the weeds are like dandelions. They're like a half weed, a half flower. And that's okay. It's okay to have weeds in your garden as long as you're a good cultivator. Weeds are going to grow, but you're cultivating, right? Because you're cultivating with your exercise. You're cultivating every day by just your awareness that they're there, right? You're cultivating them. So I think that anything that you do to influence or affect the subconscious is it should absolutely be in part of your daily practice, in the rituals that you do, because it's like a way of basically like turning over what's on the inside, like letting it be free. We've been taught to compartmentalize for so long, and like, and depending on your age, I would say, but this is no time for compartmentalization. Like, you've got to express and feel what you're feeling to move through it. If you don't feel what you're feeling, then you're gonna push. It's still gonna affect you. Don't think it's not.
Yeah.
The background.
Yeah, and I think it's true. I love the idea of like creating the inroads to get to the subconscious, because I know there's one client that I had that I would ask her, like, so what was going on in your personal life during these years? Like, because there were these big gaps.
Yeah.
And she was like she would just, but I knew she was a really successful businesswoman. And so I was like, okay, so what was going on in your business life? Oh, I won this award then, I became this director here. And so like she had the map, and then I was like, okay, so then what was happening before you got to this award ceremony? And then all of a sudden she saw the shit show. Like,
yeah.
That was the way of getting to that information, because it's all wired together, but there's what she was blocking some stuff out, right?
Yeah.
And I think about myself, like I always had this weight journey. I was so, like, since I was 9, also some of the females in my life who cared about that a little too much, and so I started to, and so it was like something that drove me crazy all the time. But at some point I was just like, you know what? I have to figure out this other part of my life. Like I got to the place of realizing that there was a lot more emotional pain that was tied to it. So I started doing all of this work. And then I remember like just building that awareness of like, why am I doing the things that I'm doing in this relationship? Why am I saying this right now? And I remember the moment that it like all hit me for the food was I was at a family holiday gathering, and there was this, as often there are at holiday gatherings, right? Like personalities. And I remember that I ate like an entire bowl of guacamole with most of the chips. And I got like 3/4 of the way through it. And it was like, then the awareness turned on, unfortunately. And I realized that it was like, I'm putting this in so that nothing comes out. Because
yes,
the stuff that I want to say to those people,
setting yourself up with food.
it was going to be helpful, but not nice. Like, it was going to hurt them. And not because I wanted them to be hurt, but because I knew that if I put the mirror on, and so that was my way of like dimming myself out of the room so that I didn't make everyone else uncomfortable.
Shut down.
Even though it probably would have helped everyone for me to be like, stop being how about you take some responsibility in here? Whatever it was that I was going to say. But like those moments, those pathways in, like, I think that's amazing.
But what happens is then we subconsciously get tied to some of those behaviors, and then you keep doing them. So I don't know if it became a pattern for you, but that is what our subconscious does. If you've done it a few times, your subconscious goes, anything you've done in repetition, it's listening, and it goes, oh, this is what we're doing. And that's part of its brilliance, is to repeat information or repeat patterns. We just want them to be the right patterns, right? We want our amazingness, our skills, that we work so hard for, our habits to be subconscious, so it's easy. Yeah. But unfortunately, we also have it works the other way around too.
Yeah.
But that's how they get started, is things like that.
Yeah. And I think that pattern had been going on because I started to trace it back, and I was like, oh yeah, there's the 9-year-old Stephanie's face, and there's 17-year-old with the Oreos, and I had something different that I was stuffing my mouth with different people. But having the awareness and having the intention that was kind of like under my entire life at that point of just completely transforming and healing all of those parts, having that awareness, like it became a trigger. So every time I would like I would notice it sooner. I would notice it earlier and then be able to be like, oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, you're totally tipping off all my excitement about vital mind cycles. I started noticing these patterns with my clients. I would say probably about 4 years ago. I started creating graphs that showed how the cycle works, because it really is, like you said, you mentioned triggers. We get triggered, and it's unconsciously triggered.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't realize it until you had a need to realize it, right? So we keep going on with these patterns, whether they're health patterns or productivity patterns, all kinds of things, relationship patterns. We don't tend to change them or start to notice, slow down the process and be like, oh, what was I triggered by? We don't do that until we are trying to overcome ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we tend to slow it down and go, okay, what are the pieces? And so I have spent quite a bit of time putting together those types of, that type of research for my clients, is so they see that underneath it all, it usually comes from a great need that you didn't get to express. And so for everybody across the board, no matter what it is, like for me, it was like love. I didn't get the love that I needed, and so I would go looking for it in all the wrong places. This is very early childhood stuff. And once I realized that, I thought, oh my gosh. So I was looking for love in the bottom of ice cream, for so long. I'd look for love in the wrong tribes of people when I talked about my rebellious self. So I had to find in me, well, how can I get the feeling that I need in healthier, more beneficial ways? So the focus is that you get your needs met, because we are driven as humans. That's human behavior, is that we have to get our needs met. That will happen in negative and positive ways. Mm-hmm. So for you, I would imagine that you then discovered, well, how could I get my need met of being heard? And then learning to do that in ways that are actually beneficial for me to grow and prosper. Yeah. I want to hear the end of that.
Well, I think to your point about the needs, the thing that really shifted it, and it was only last year, was realizing that I had this total polarization. So there was I was either being good, like these female characters in my life told me good means restricting your food and wearing tight pants and like all the controls, right? And so if I could check that off, I felt like a good girl. And then over here, if then at one point I'd be like, fuck all that. I want a damn potato chip or a whole bag. I need some chocolate or whatever it was, right? And so I would just swing. Like both of those things couldn't be together at the same time.
Yeah.
So last year, through a whole bunch of stuff, it was like everything converged, and I went, oh, I need something that will meet both of these needs at once. Now I can see that and develop it. And so now it's not even an issue anymore. It doesn't really, really irritate me. But yeah, I was like these competing needs, and I'd be over here and I'd call that one wrong, and I'd be over here and I'd call that one wrong, but they were all like really important to me. Like I do need discipline, but I also need pleasure.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't agree more. Yes. I love that. You were hitting it right on the nail there. Absolutely. That runs in all of us, right? So that's for us to explore those things and to uncover them. I always think it's just like uncover every stone. That's what I'm going to do in this lifetime. I'm going to uncover every stone. Mm-hmm. And sometimes your family members don't like that.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So, that's why it's important that we hang out with other people that are on that same, like focus. Mm-hmm. So.
It's true. Because that dynamic that we created early and that was one of those big moments for me last year. I actually went down to, and my mom was like, she's so health conscious and she'd always make us great food, and food was love to her. Like this is how she nurtured us and took care of us. She was so busy, like it was her act of loving us, And so to be like, I'm not hungry right now. Like I had to go through this entire way of recalibrating how I was going to be around them, because I would just default into the wanting to please, like any child does, right? Like, so it was just so fascinating to watch. But I remember that there was this whole scenario that went down, and I was like, I realized I am totally like, I have already figured out how to meet all my needs and I am not being pulled in any direction here. This is so awesome.
Freedom. Yeah, that's freedom,
But
right?
it was the test, you know, to go back to that like original dynamic that kind of was
Exactly.
part of setting, although, you know, if my grandmother had been there, it might have been a little bit tougher because she was a pretty strong pull on that too. But yeah, really, really cool stuff. I'm so excited for what you're doing in the world. I love that you're working on your next book, right?
I am. Yeah, my titles keep switching around. But yeah, I feel like the components are coming together, and my next piece is really, I want to work on the interview portion of it, and really interviewing some amazing creative people that have overcome a lot of things. And I think that part of the story is really important piece, because I think we view success as like, oh, that person has their shit together, and you know, or I mean, now it's becoming more popular to then share the real vulnerable stories. It's actually becoming acceptable. It's actually part of marketing, which is shocking how much it's changed in just 10 years, I would say. Nobody used to talk about their vulnerabilities at all. And now it's actually popular to do that. So I feel like if there's any time that's been the right time for my type of stuff, it's now. And it's really fun. I used to really wonder how it is that I could actually fit into a corporate market as a speaker. But now I am being invited to keynote on those very topics, on the struggles of the subconscious mind, like I call them the assets versus the liabilities, but teaching people how their struggles have become their strengths in a corporate setting is just, I think it's phenomenal. And I'm excited to be a part of this work.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all you do. I'm sorry that we've run out of time. It feels like we could probably do interviews 2 and 3, but I should wrap up with my regular questions. Are you ready for them?
Yes.
Okay. So what was the first book or message that changed your life?
So in around 1997, a friend of mine gave me Succulent Wild Women by Sark. And oh my gosh, if that did not give me permission to be wild, loved that book. And it was super colorful and creative, and loved that book. And I wrote down the quote from her. She says, "A succulent wild woman is one of any age who feels free to fully express herself in every dimension."
Love
So
it. Ooh,
love that.
goosebump level right there.
Love that.
How about your favorite book?
So I have two. The first one is Wayne Dyer, The Power of Intention. That book, it got me to run a marathon. I listened to it on Audible over miles and miles and miles and miles. And I listened to it over and over again. It's probably a 10-hour book. And I listened to it over and over again on replay. And I just got so much out of it. Every time I was viscerally like doing the work and putting out the intention, it was a completely transformative experience. So I would say Power of Intention by Wayne Dyer. Everyone should have it in their Audible library and keep it on loop. The second one is just recently by Mel Robbins. I'm totally loving her work right now. She's so fun because she's funny and super blatant and just kind of in your face. And I do admire that part of her, and it's very her own unique style. But it's called Kick Ass. And you listen in on coaching experiences. And for me, listening to her, it really validated some of the processes that I do with my clients. So that's why I picked that book, for that reason.
Awesome. And who's your favorite messenger?
Oh my gosh, my favorite messenger. Oh, I didn't have that one ready. My favorite messenger. Gosh, I'm going to say Amelia Earhart. Women Can Fly. In the time when my whole light bulb was going off 20 years ago, when I felt like I was really kind of coming into myself at 28, I bought a baseball cap that said Women Fly. And that, it was based on Amelia Earhart. And I just loved her fearlessness, like the fearlessness that she exemplified, and She died doing it, but I thought it was absolutely amazing. So that message has carried me far.
I love it. I love it. So then how can our audience connect with you if they want you to come do a show or figure out your resources?
DeannaNunez.com.
Okay. Yeah, and we're gonna have that linked on the page as well, so they'll be able to catch you there. So thank you so much. This was so fun. I feel like we could do it again. Maybe we will. I like while you're talking, I'm like, oh, I need to include Dan. I'm working on stuff over here, programs and stuff.
I want my next book to be on your books behind you. That's
awesome. That's right. I got Burning Fat Pants right here. So yeah. And I also want to thank our listeners for joining us today. I'd love to hear what you're taking from today. Like, tell us what you got out of this. I know both Deanna and I would love to know. And of course, I need to thank our sponsor, sitechisel.com, because they're awesome. And they are giving all of my listeners 10% discount with the code Mindful10. So thank you, Deanna.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. I appreciate it.
Awesome. I loved it. And that's a wrap for today.